welcome to the Meshery Dev Call. It's November 18th. Let me send a link to the meeting minutes in the chat. There you go. Please go ahead and add your names to the attendees list. Add any topics that you want to the agenda. And it's KubeCon week, so we'll have a shorter attendance list than usual. I'm hoping we won't, but let's see. All right. Do add your names to the attendees list because otherwise I will. And let's not. All right. So this is KubeCon week, and LAFI was well presented, much to the delight of everybody. And we have 3 upcoming events, which you can see listed out here. You can also go read about them on the LAFI blog. Again, a link is included here. So I guess today will be the service mesh specifications talk, which is taken up by Lee and Kush. Lee is on the call. Kush might be joining soon.
Hey, good morning. Hey, we just had a meeting the hour before this one with that was an SMP meeting, a service mesh performance meeting. And we were meeting with Otto, who's the core maintainer of Nighthawk. Nighthawk is Envoy's load generator. And we were discussing SMP and how Nighthawk fits into that. We're actually discussing a new project as well called Get Nighthawk. And and we were telling him that Nighthawk will be on stage at KubeCon, and that's the talk. That first one, service mesh specifications. So service mesh performance, or SMP, being one of those specifications. And then it is talked about in that talk. The other one that's talked about is SMI, Service Mesh Interface. We just had a Meet the Maintainers talk at KubeCon yesterday, which went pretty well. Dhruv was on that call, and so was Abhishek Kumar, or as he's known in this meeting, Abhishek Fantango. Since he didn't write his name down, we will just make up last names for people. Both of those gents demonstrated Meshery's SMI conformance capability, which was great. But yeah, so then I guess I didn't realize, thank you for pointing this out, Shriti, because I didn't realize. So today we need to be on hand to field questions after people watch that talk. So I'm gonna go take a look at my calendar.
All right. Yep, and we also have another session coming up on 20th. So if anybody missed out on yesterday's or can't attend today, you have another opportunity on 20th, and you can go sign up. You have to sign up before, right, Lee?
No, I mean, you have to register for KubeCon, but then beyond that, you can willy-nilly kind of pop into any talk from there.
Also, will the sessions be recorded?
Yeah, they are, and they will, almost all of them will be public. I say almost all because like the Meet the Maintainers that we did yesterday, it was held over Zoom and it was recorded. I just don't have confirmation that they're, my guess is that they'll publish that one as well. But these other two, they are definitely recorded and they'll definitely be available on YouTube after KubeCon.
Nice. All right, that's another chance for anybody who missed out on it and also didn't sign up for KubeCon. So you can go ahead and see it afterwards. And that's it for the announcements for this particular week. Abhishek, you're up. I was looking forward to pronouncing your last name, but you corrected it, so I can't now.
Sure. Yeah. Hey everybody. Today we'll be discussing on the progress which with the projects Meshkit and the Meshery Adapter library that we are working on for the past month or so. Um, so I'll just share my screen to get in the specifics. All right. Uh, so is my screen visible?
Yep, it is.
Oh, great. Uh, so I'll just 1 second. I think I should share the desktop. Okay, great. So the project that I'm talking about here is this repository, a mesh kit, which is a set of utility libraries and common libraries for or supporting libraries for all of the microservices that we built in Meshery. And so there is another repository that is involved on the same utility, but which is specific to adapters. It's called the Meshery Adapter library. So this repository basically has the common utilities and the repeated codes and all of those templates in that is specific to all the adapters across all the adapters, and those are basically brought in here to facilitate as a library. When we look at the mesh kit, it has so our common use cases on different microservices have gets involved with using loggers, using error objects, using custom errors, or say using custom utilities, etc. So to solve those challenges, we just decided to create this package. So the higher level of this package involves all of these components that we want to use. Like for example, if you look at the logger would have the basic implementation and a structural implementation of the logger that we wanted to use across all the projects. And so if any of the applications want to use, or if any of the applications that is being created wants to use a logging component, they can out of the box import this library to sort of use it. So this ensures that there is uniformity and stability across all the projects in Meshery, and also the loggers and the error object especially that we try to create. uh, it has a lot of additional information rather than the Golang default error objects. For example, the error message or the error object from any Meshery project here would give you the error code, the severity of the error, the short description and the longer description, along with what the probable cause is, and it also suggests a remediation for that particular error that any user is facing. So such customizations to facilitate such customizations, we've created this particular particular package, and we've got different other use cases with different other utilities. For example, in utils library, we've got a couple of utility functions which are very much useful in our daily in our regular projects. Like for example, if we want to check if an endpoint is reachable or not, we have a function called TCP check that is related to network. And if you want to quickly generate a UID, we've got a rapid function for UID. And so we've also got a set of utilities for Kubernetes inside Kubernetes folder as well. So this meshkit package is a whole it contains a whole lot of general and very much reusable components. uh, so that's about meshkit here, and each of these packages that you see here are can be imported independently. And so yes, this is not much mature yet because we've just got started with it. And this particular thing is being tracked in a couple of documentations. I'll post the link for the documentations on the comments, so that if any of you guys are interested to collaborate, uh, you can refer to that or connect with us to get started with this. So yeah, so that's all about the MeshKit project that we have worked on. Uh, and the second bit I want to discuss is about Meshery Adapter Library. So this particular library is, as I said, it's designed for designed specific to the adapter use cases. And so this has got all the components. For example, if we want to use different config providers to maintain adapter configs, we've got the facility for that as well. Right now we've got a Viper and in-memory configs, and so we've got a concrete config interface which manages the config lifecycle of the adapters, and that's about config packages. And if you look at the proto buffers the adapters would use, that has also been exported as a package in here, and also the grpc or the tracing utilities or the server that needs to be embedded over the adapter, that has also been uh, library that has also been presented as a library in here, so that each of the adapter, when it is developing, they just have to import these packages, and then uh, they can just implement their business logic in their adapter code, and everything will work out of the box. So in other words, we can call this a framework for the adapters itself, because it's got a whole lot of utilities as well. Like for example, it's like how we have sample applications that are running in Meshery, that we can install via Meshery. All of those operations are also being generalized in one of the packages inside the library. And so we don't have to always define these operations in different adapters. And we've also got a special package called status, which tracks the status of any operation, and it tracks the description for the status. And so yeah, this is something that is specific to adapters. And yeah, that's more about the Meshery adapter library. So these are the only two projects
I,
that.
I'll inject a question if I could. You were explaining the status yesterday, and just to clarify, like the
Mhm,
status that's here in the Meshery adapter,
mhm.
uh, does that can you go in and open up that file if you would, to give it to kind of walk through a couple of examples as to how this is used? Is So this could be that Meshery is performing like this is in context of Meshery performing an operation. An operation could be installing a service mesh.
Mhm.
Okay. And then, um,
Well, for example, let's take an example of the Kuma adapter. Uh, let's say, for example, in Kuma adapter, we want to install Kuma. For example, the install operation for Kuma. We start with the status as installing, and then after every step and each and every step as we progress, we just track in the status, and then at the end we just change the status to install. It's just a reference or a tracker for that dies that gets created within the function and dies within the function. And so it's entirely stateless, if that is what you wanted to know.
it kind of, yeah, I think I was convinced when you had said it before, and this makes perfect, it makes total sense. And then it is so the purpose of these constants is to help facilitate human readability to the states that are being used inside.
Yeah, and also uniformity, because uh, we don't want to give in different descriptions on different places.
Nice. That makes sense. That's great.
So does anyone have any questions, or any questions on collaborating, or anyone is interested in collaborating, helping us making these uh, making these libraries much mature? They can I can post the links for the docs, and they can reach out in person on Slack with me as well.
Abhishek, to clarify, I think part of that call to action, is this next characterization correct? There's there was a there's an initial and current set of adapters, 9 of them, that interface with 9 different types of service meshes. Those adapters have a lot of repetition inside of them, like they kind of repeat themselves a lot. We're trying to be take a dry approach, the do not repeat yourself principle, and apply that by extracting a lot of common functionality into this Meshery adapter library, and then having like more or less a semblance of that first set, basically sort of a kind of an initial library. Uh, like there are people in the community, yourself and Michu and others in the community that are going back and refactoring existing adapters to much more intelligently leverage this library. Is part of your call to action here for someone who might be interested in taking a specific adapter and up leveling it, like refactoring to use the library? Is that what you were asking, or one of the things you were asking?
Yeah, that's it.
Nice. Okay, well, that's a hell of an opportunity. Okay, nice. Yeah, especially if somebody like, so what are some of the, like Istio, that adapter, it hasn't been refactored yet, has it?
No.
Oh, okay. So there's an opportunity for someone to go take the Istio adapter. All right, let's see. Okay, good, cool.
Yeah.
The Istio adapter, the Linker D adapter, it hasn't been worked on. Okay, uh, nice. So the OSM adapter, the open service mesh adapter, that was demoed. You demoed that yesterday at KubeCon. Um, that one, it still needs to be refactored. Is that right? I wish I could. I don't. That's right. Right. It's still.
Okay. I think I lost a bit of.
Oh. So anyway, good. I guess what I was trying to highlight to those that might be interested is that, yeah, there's an opportunity to lay claim to an adapter of the particular mesh that you might like. Moreover, those things get demoed on stage often. You just demoed the OSM adapter yesterday at KubeCon.
Yeah. Yes. Totally. So we've got a bunch of adapters uh, that that we want people to get involved with, and it's not basically we've got we've just started with Kuma adapter and console adapter for the time being, and the rest of them are very much easy, very much available for grabs. And the person who can help out with getting you started would be uh, me one, and there is Miguel who can who's also equally active, and he's been equally contributing to this particular to these projects. So he's one other point of contact for getting seeking help. And yeah, so uh, there is also Utkarsh, who is also well aware, and he's also been contributing for this project. So yeah, so these are just names that I've brought up so that you can uh, reach out in person to seek help. All right. So does anyone have any other questions?
Um, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Um, at the not on the adapter, on the other one, you had like 26 tags. Why? I mean, I'm not interested. Why do you have so many tags? But how are you gonna tag
Uh,
this? Because I'm thinking on only preserving master for tagging and doesn't matter for which adapter you do the changes in the kit.
Right.
Oh, no, not for this one, not for this one. For the
Yeah.
mesh kit. Actually, yeah, also for this one because those two goes together. So
Right.
yeah, for mesh kit you have 23 tags.
Mhm. Uh,
What's the what's the logic
uh,
behind it?
Yeah, so basically, as and when we try to put in more features or try to enhance this particular package, we create a new tag and then make a release for the tag, basically, uh, to point it to the latest, so that uh, we don't want to we don't want to break the previous build, because there might be a number of packages who are using the previous build, but also we need to provide these enhanced features to the new to be available. So we just create a new tag.
Okay, from master or
Yeah, from master. So basically, each of them progress from their previous version.
mm-hmm. No, it's okay. I was just surprised that you already have 23 tags, and I was thinking if it's just now
Well, yeah, I mean,
to
we
see couple of tags. That's why.
yeah, we've been a lot active for the past month, so there have been a lot of contributions, a lot of comments, a lot of announcements that were made by different people. So that's the reason you see 23 on there.
Yeah. Also, another thing that I was thinking about the tags, not necessarily about the history. So, for instance, you're starting using the mesh kit in a version of the adapter
Mhm.
that um that version has to be fixed, not from master. That was actually what I wanted to say, and that means that when I'm seeing the adapter, yeah,
Exactly. Yeah.
uh-huh,
So here, if you can see,
okay,
that after library is fixed to 18, although we have
uh-huh,
three releases.
okay, yeah. It's okay. This one I was thinking, how would I know
Mhm. Got it.
which one is built? Okay, sorry for interrupting. Thanks.
Okay. So anyone else? Okay. Yeah, I guess I'm done. That's all I wanted to show. We can move ahead with the rest of the agendas.
All right. I don't believe we have Utkarsh on the call today.
Yeah, we don't.
Damn. Uh, well, that brings us to the end of the documented agendas. If does anybody else have anything to bring up for today? All right.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Actually,
Yeah.
this might be a good time to, since we're talking about MeshKit and the adapter library, there are one or two open comments on a recent PR for the adapter library that might be helpful for us to cover, since Michu and Abhishek are here, and since folks are kind of learning about this, we might want to dive in. Abhishek, do you have, or Michu, do you have that PR handy?
Sure, I can share my screen. Okay. It's in here.
So as the adapter library gets built out, there's there's functions to build into it, and just open reviews on how those functions work. I'd given some comments that I thought like, if I was reading my comments, I might have it might serve us well to have a verbal conversation to help speed it along. Because I felt like I was, some of my comments were probably like holding back progress. That wouldn't be good. So, um, and maybe rather than me driving the conversation, Abhishek, did you feel like any of these were unresolved or could use some discussion?
Uh, so let's rather we'll go one by one. Basically, it's only a couple of it's only three comments that you dropped. So the first one being that you were just wondering if it should be info command. So this is also this has been changed. I've updated and pushed a new change for that. Uh, so for those of
Okay.
you who doesn't have any context, the issue is that if we want to name it as book info command rather than just book info, we don't want any verbs or
Yeah, that's close. I mean, I think Michael might have had a comment about the use of the word command as maybe as opposed to the use of the word operation. If I
yes.
enter, okay. So that's a that's a I second that comment or not or like yeah, that's a good comment. Mine was a little bit different in that mine was a bit of a more of a pain in the rump, more of a pain in the rear type comment, which was like ideally, in my mind at least, or there's a trade-off that happens between software working very well and having really high quality and software that is flexible and does what you want it to do. It's kind of funny because there's an interesting spectrum. Like there's some, and it's yeah. Anyway, I'll try not to be too philosophical, I guess, but suffice to say that we're baking in, hard coding in support for a few sample applications for purposes of helping people understand service meshes and play with them, explore them, which is good and useful and something that people find value in today and for a long time from now. Uh, this approach, though, also bears an issue when a new version of that sample app comes out or a someone wants to have Meshery deploy their application, like something that's not a sample application, and um, and so yeah, the like really the thing that I was kind of suggesting here is that adapters are ideally very mechanical in nature, that they execute particular capabilities, but some of the yeah, some
Yeah.
of the
Yeah, Lee. So I think we had this discussion before. So we basically, even if we wanna do it, if we wanna update or give some updates without release, without making a release, we don't have that provision at the moment because, be it Meshery server or the adapters, it run as a container, and asking people to sign in into the container and then
we wouldn't ask them that. Yeah, and then this is why I'm having the discussion in part like out loud for everyone to kind of give an opportunity to jump in um, and engage. Is that what we're doing is hard coding in the names of applications. We're also hard coding in the verbs for each of them, and ideally, as we refactor and overhaul the adapters, you take into consideration new architectural approaches, and so now is an appropriate time to do that. um, I don't know if V2 is, if we can include all of this in V2, but to the extent that things like this are externalized from compiled code, it's a lot easier to, or it can be a lot easier for people to change that code, like add another sample app. If it's externalized, that externalization can be on the file system of the Docker container, or it can be of a remote file somewhere else, or a remote endpoint like Meshery itself, where the user goes in, types in the name of the application that they'd like to have provisioned, and they supply a manifest, and then Meshery will remember that name and persist that manifest such that when, and it might do that centrally, right? And then such that they can then take that manifest and go over to a particular service mesh and say, well, I'd like to deploy this application onto this mesh. And Meshery and its adapters would have no prior understanding of what that service is, that set of workloads. Rather, the adapter's job would be to say, well, good, I'll receive your manifest, which, by the way, it's missing its sidecar or it's missing its service mesh specific configuration. The adapter would then add those, would manipulate that YAML, would manipulate and do what it needed to do to that manifest and pass it along. So really the essence of the comment that I had here was to get away from hard coding if we can. As we think about that, like one would be to move away from the word sample, because people then start to treat Meshery as a playground, which it's useful for that, but that's not its ultimate goal. To maybe get, and I think it's application and workload are probably interchangeable words, so we could use one or the other. But in our conversations, I had said like, oh, we can externalize these names and put them into a YAML file, kind of in, externally. That's helpful as a first step, because then you don't have to recompile the code to accept a new app. But really, like that would just be kind of a first step, or like maybe not even something that we should do. Rather, these would be separated from the adapter. The adapters are to have service mesh specific knowledge. So the console one needs to know that it has to add annotations on pod specs, because that's what console needs for running services on console. Whereas for Istio or a different mesh, it may not need to, it may not, depending upon whether or not the sidecar injector is currently running in that namespace that they want to provision to, it really may not need to do anything to the YAML. So yeah,
what is the source of truth for the YAML?
source of truth for the YAML is the publishers of the workload. So if it's a sample app, it probably comes from the service meshes themselves. And if it's something that is unique, like if Josh, who's on the call, if he took it and deployed it in his environment, but Josh has his own app, it's Josh.
Well, that is already been taken care of. Yeah, so right here, you can see this. That's basically that it comes from the source of truth. Basically, if it is emoji order, then it comes from Buoyant repository. But the problem is that what about this particular thing? So we've defined the operation here, and you said that the operation itself should be fed in by a source. And what would that source be?
Wait, say it again, that the operation would be what?
So like we have the list of operations in here, for example, HTTP bin or image hot or emoji auto. So all of these list of operations that are defined along with their properties on where would they look for the YAML, and what would the description for that in the UI, and what are the available versions, and etc. So you were talking about this hard coding, correct?
Right.
So I wanted to know the source of truth for this data. So where will this data be?
Right. Yeah, it could be. Well, yeah, this is a little bit of a different architecture, such that it would be, so in order to guarantee that those applications actually work, that when in the UI, when it says, would you like to provision emoji Voto, this community, the publishers of Meshery need to verify that it works. And so, so we bear that responsibility in some respects. But the description that you were just pointing to, it could be either in the adapter, which is a little bit of slightly repetitive, to the extent that ideally every app that we support, you can provision across any service mesh. And so ideally, like you might define that in Meshery itself, like in the given release of Meshery, here's the applications that it is capable of deploying, and then you can um, add on to that. Like the point here of what I'm making with this comment is that the the mechanics where we're listing what the name of the app is, the operation for it is, the version of that, um, having those mechanics in the library or in an adapter, that's good and what we want. What apps go in there though would ideally be things that you can that the user can manipulate from Meshery UI. They can like remove that sample app because they just don't like it and they don't want to see it anymore. They're not going to use it, or add a new app because they brought their own. And so to the extent that yeah, you either can have that defined in the adapter in the adapter library, but ideally like without additional, if we're baking it into for hard coding and it requires recompilation and a release of Meshery itself and of the adapter itself, it becomes it can be okay, providing the user some controls to maybe hide those would be helpful, but providing the user the ability to like let's say that a new version, ideally every adapter, um, it will support, if Istio 1.8 comes out right now, does the adapter support that? Well, today it doesn't because it explicitly lists out every single version that it does support. Ideally, it would also have a perpetual latest, which hopefully the current adapter code supports. It may be the case that Istio changes so significantly that the adapter doesn't, but hopefully it would. And to the extent that it does, we would have a latest in there. And it would be the same thing for the sample apps that like it's too rigid is what I'm saying. And we want to have some way of
Yeah,
not have to
I think
cut.
we had this discussion before, and we were talking about a new component that comes in, which is an OPA, which runs alongside a Meshery server. So all the dynamicity of or of every component, be it the sample applications or the supported operations or whatever it is, can be moved in there, and then that can feed in all of these.
Yep, potentially. Yeah, I mean, OPA itself wouldn't have the. Yeah, it's a good discussion. Like OPA itself wouldn't be the repository, sort of the source of truth for what applications Meshery supports, because it wouldn't have that long-term persistence. It would be capable of connecting to that long-term persistence. It might be the case that of what we're delivering in this version of the adapter library is maybe we're not able to achieve, maybe it's like it's too big of a step. What I'm describing is maybe too big of a step for this, this iteration. Because to the step that's been taken with the adapter library here is amazing. It's so much better than the implementation that we have in the current set of adapters, and the way that yourself and Michael and others that are participating have brought in inheritance as a core concept to how to the flow from Meshkit to Meshery adapter library down to the adapters themselves, really powerful. And it's also kind of a lot. So maybe the things that I'm suggesting here, I might have to put a pin in it, like because it's just it otherwise we might get mired up. Like
Mhm. Got it.
so on that, Michael, any thoughts here? Like we're kind of, I'm kind of suggesting that I retract my comment, like and you know log it for a future consideration. Anybody else have?
I think it as a long-term plan. I think it's definitely something we should consider. I think it's a bit too big for veto, maybe. Um, externalizing something like this, maybe externalizing code or making it configurable, means also, I think, that you introduce some risks. So you have to think carefully about what it means to know that you can support future versions of a workload, for instance, meaning that usually if you do something like this, I think you have to have much more tests that run as soon as maybe you discover a new version of a workload. And the code always helps you, or compilation always helps you to discover stuff like this. And also, if we externalize it in YAML files or JSON files, all the operations go configuration that we saw a minute ago. It still means we have to, somewhere we have to version, or we have to package, we have to copy it to somewhere. So this have to have a good plan for this, and also a good plan, I think, to be able to support adapter specific modifications, or maybe even overrides if the modifications are too risky or too complicated to implement. It's automatically adjusted. And for some service meshes, maybe not everything can be controlled using manifests. Not now, but maybe in the future. So if we sort of like also have a plan to, to make it possible to override this and extend this in a good way, in a safe way. But I think it's something we should continue to discuss. And if we sort of have this long-term plan, then changes to the libraries can go in the right direction, because we know in the back of our minds, yeah, in the end we would like to externalize it, possibly.
Mission accomplished for me. That this is perfect. This is more or less, even when I was writing the comment, kind of what I was hoping we would conclude with, which is that
I do, but I'm not the one who wrote the code and who put the hard things there. But I do agree with your previous opinion, Lee. So if you do it now, it's less of a headache than if you do it as your speed, even 1 week later, or even worse, 1 month later, and so on. That's one opinion. Second opinion, workload, it's a common name for when you deploy a service in Kubernetes. So workload is the app itself, so that's okay. I mean, when you say application, everybody will think of something else. Workload is for sure what it means. And third thing, if we use labels like you have the workload description and you have labels, and use some specific Meshery labels, Meshery adapters labels. One could be the application sample name, the workload name, or if I'm out of the context, I will stop now. Not sure how to say it. But from what I see, it's like you're doing a deployment, so you can also use labels on your some specific labels. You can use as many as you want in the workload. So not sure if we have ingress, egress, whatever these things already, or context, or yeah. But then everything that is going to be related with the workload or with the deployment or with whatever we want to delete, the workload and all the extra associated, then we can use the labels. I didn't see it. Doesn't mean it not exist. I didn't see it, and maybe it's not. I'm good on just adding more work for others. So, but just changing to to workload. I don't know how complicated that might be. And what is book info? Book info is related to
It comes from,
to scheduling, or is it something related to the application it's particular?
the name of the app.
Ah, okay. Uh-huh.
But yeah,
Yeah, so
thanks for that, Adina. Tossing in a couple of extra labels doesn't hurt anything and may be fairly helpful as Meshery goes to manage the life cycle of that app. Like that way, those labels could be used as filters in the UI later as well.
as
Like,
filter, as uh, like Michael said before about having a manifest, or even in the manifest we can use whatever manifest it has needed and so on. So you can use it from deployment perspective, you can use it from writing code perspective, both of them. So I do have a fourth point, by the way. Also, besides couple of main labels, you can also use like dynamic labels. Let's say for each, depends on where you can, if they have a certain prefix, I don't know, but also at one point, I don't know, depends on, let's say your application is a stack or doesn't, it needs something else or so, then you need an extra label or something like that. So leave the people who are using Meshery, who are installing a different app, to add more labels if they want.
yeah, that's a good point. Yep. Yeah, right. Actually, that's
Sorry.
powerful. Let people annotate their workloads so that, yeah, as they go to manage those ongoing, that they may want to just add their own labels and tags, annotations onto their own. So yeah, thank you, Ayush. So, and then thank you, Adina. Ayush was just, and so to wrap this up real quickly, because I think Utkarsh was going to show something, is I'll retract or put a pin in those comments so that we can consider for kind of, V3 or, V2.5 type work. I think both Abhishek and Michu, from my perspective, you guys, I think we're like in alignment with the sentiment long term, that like, hey, that ideally we're being as dynamic as possible. We're recognizing who the source of truth is for the definition of these things, that yes, each individual adapter should be considering service mesh specific things. So they should be mutating the manifest with service mesh specific annotations or labels on a namespace, or whatever needs to be done to, or like, hey, if a manifest, a workload that's going to be deployed, if it's using the same port that Envoy does, and that would create a conflict for that. Like, there's a few considerations that you take into account when you onboard a service onto the mesh. Like, is it going to work well or not? And those are mostly specific to a mesh, and that's what the adapter should be concerned with, and should have hard-coded code, well-written code that deals with that. At some point, will be less and less concerned with the specific app that you're deploying. But right now, with the stage of maturity that we're in, and how much we're kind of taking on by just in this up-leveling here, that set of concerns is a whole bucket full of work itself. And so maybe best postponed for a later point in time. Ultimately, not the most pressing concern either. When you, if we're just talking about sample applications, like those are there for purposes of demonstration and learning and understanding. And so they don't have to have the most pure architecture to, like when we get more into how to really support unique workloads that are unique to the user that we have no idea what they are, that's so. So thanks for that. That satisfies my comment.
All right, then let me interrupt here. And Utkarsh, you can go ahead with yours. Thank you for the discussion, Adina, Mikul, Lee, and Abhishek.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah, so am I audible?
Yep, you are.
Okay, let me share my screen. It is visible, right?
Yep.
Okay. Yes, so this is the Meshery dashboard. Initially, we had like any user could add Prometheus or Grafana manually. Right now, I recently added a feature where a user would be able to add their own Prometheus server if we don't list them up in here. And if we do, then they can select it automatically. So, for example, I deploy a Prometheus instance. So now when a user would come in here, they can either type the address of Prometheus server, or they would be actually prompted, like the user would basically be listed all of the Prometheus server that we discovered on the cluster. So this is the address. Right now we are actually we are listing both the endpoints, which from the basically this one is a cluster IP based endpoint, and this is the load balancer based endpoint. Because right now I don't think that we have a way to know if we are within the cluster or we are outside the cluster. So we are displaying both of them. Once we do have them, we will basically filter out some of the URLs based on the fact if we are inside the cluster or outside the cluster. Similar is for Grafana. If we deploy Grafana dashboard from here. So similarly, Grafana would also we would also list Grafana, like the instance of Grafana that we have discovered, and similar just like in Prometheus, we list out both the load balancer as well as cluster IP based endpoints, because again we are not right now familiar if we are within the cluster or outside the cluster. So you can select one and submit it, and we can just add it directly from here. And it could not communicate. Yeah. Okay. So, like, any feedbacks? Was I audible?
Yep, you are.
Yes, you are.
Okay.
Dhruv and Husseina, Anirudh.
I just wanted to ask, is your Meshery deployed inside the cluster or outside the cluster? This is working both ways, right?
And so, and Utkarsh, you can, but in this case, yeah, so that's an important consideration to account for is, I think in this environment, Utkarsh has Meshery deployed external to the cluster. It's actually important to note that status, like there needs to be a property or of a struct or something where Meshery, where we document for a given deployment, Meshery needs to determine whether or not it itself is deployed inside of a cluster or outside. It has that logic today. When Utkarsh, if you go to the environment tab, it will it has the logic today. The logic follows like this. Meshery wakes up, it looks into its environment variables. If it sees that there's a secret that has a certificate to talk to a Kube API, it says, well, I must be deployed in cluster. I'll go ahead and try to connect to Kube API, and I'll connect. And so I'm in cluster. I'm an in cluster deployment. If it doesn't find that environment variable, it moves over to a different environment variable, or it moves over and looks at the local file system and looks for kube config in the, to be available to it. And if it finds that, then it goes forth, tries to connect to Kubernetes and says, well, I'm out of cluster, and so I'll use this. And we need to persist. We need to have like a common global property in Meshery that says Meshery server is inside or outside of Kubernetes, because that's something that we'll use as a flag in various pieces of logic. And so to Drew's point, that flag would be used in the logic. Utkarsh, when you go to metrics, and there's one or more Prometheus discovered in the environment, it's sort of like, well, or maybe there's just one Prometheus discovered in the environment. The question is, what's most appropriate for Meshery to use? Is it most appropriate for Meshery to use the cluster IP to connect to Meshery, or the external IP? Well, depends on if Meshery is deployed inside the cluster or outside the cluster. So, cool. By the way, I don't know if, see, this is funny, or it's not funny. I bet none of you have ever done this. Have any of you ever taken a Grafana board, a chart, and pasted it in here, a board definition? If anyone has, say it, and I'm gonna send you a layer 5 t-shirt. I'm serious. There's actually a box of them and we need to send them out, but unfortunately no one has, and it's not your fault. It's the fault of the user experience here. Like, this is an awesome capability. People know Grafana. They've invested into the charts and the boards that they're using. And they might want to look at those same metrics while they're examining the performance of their mesh. We understand that, of course they do. And Meshery doesn't intend to displace Grafana, but it does want to bring generate some new stats and show them. And so it's best to show those in context of what was happening on your node and what was happening in other things that you're already tracking. Well, so you can just paste in your definitions here or you can paste in Prometheus queries here and bring your own queries. On the Grafana tab, that's actually exactly what Meshery is doing automatically. Meshery is automatically using Grafana's SDK, connecting to Grafana, retrieving the names of any boards and charts that you might already have defined in that instance, and letting you choose which ones you want to display here. It's a powerful capability, pretty cool that Meshery has it. Very few people get to it, and very few demonstrations have it included. Why? Well, because of the missing link that Utkarsh is taking on. That's because like using Istio 1.5 and prior as an example, it would certainly in its demo profile would by default have an instance of Prometheus deployed as well as Grafana. So too does Linkerd. Well, those things are just sitting there. Meshery actually discovers them, knows that Grafana and Prometheus are sitting there, but we didn't expose that in the UI. And so we just needed to take this extra little step to like take the thing that we've already discovered, register it automatically, just like we discover if Kubernetes is present and register that connection. Sometimes that will be wrong, and people need to go into settings and say, no, disconnect from that Kubernetes, connect to this one. Same thing with Grafetheus or Profana. The same thing with either Prometheus or Grafana, that it'll, like you may have multiple of those in the environment. We'll choose one, and if it's wrong, people will change it. But a lot better to do that and expose the capability than have it hidden, because I'm quite sure that anyone who's ever used Meshery hasn't gotten to these nice aspects. So, all right. Oh, over time.
Just a minute up. That's kind of a record for us. All right, Utkarsh, thank you. Thank you for the demo. I need to go update the documentation for the same. And that's it. That's it for today. Thank you for coming in, everybody. We are ending on time for once.
Bye, everyone.
That's, yeah, bye.
Bye all. You guys.
Bye. See us on KubeCon.